All right. So, let's first use the little reactions and do like thumbs up if you think it was a good movie, thumbs down if you think it was bad. Do they have those? Yeah, they do. And then we can talk about, oh, good, we're all in agreement. I guess that's less debate, but oh well, we can still talk about it. So what kind of things do you think made it a good movie?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Um, I thought it was good for like the Andrew, like you saw like his development throughout the movie. Um, like you could see how Fletcher was like sort of driving him crazy to be better. And yeah, that's it.
Right. Trent?
I agree. Just to echo, like the character arc was really good for Andrew. Um, and I think there was this like common thread of like toxic masculinity throughout. Um, he used like some like derogatory terms or like a lot throughout the movie to hit to Andrew and the other musicians. And I think the psychology of what's the guy's name? The
Fletcher.
conductor.
Fletcher.
Fletcher. Yeah, the psychology of him is very interesting, and how abusive and manipulative and sadistic, like how he asks um Andrew about his life, and you think he's like a good person, and then he uses that against him, like his mother, like saying like this is why mommy left you. And then also that scene where Andrew kind of throughout the movie wants to like Fletcher, and like Fletcher is nice to the kid, like he's looking through like before they play. Do you know the scene I'm talking about? There's like a little girl and he's like, you can play in my band when you become a musician. And so it's like Andrew, even in the end, wants to like Fletcher, which is like to me like one of the most jarring parts of the movie.
Did you like Stockholm syndrome vibes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with y'all about like the character development, especially in Andrew. I feel like I was curious to see a little bit more of like Fletcher's backstory, like really going off of like the really going off of like how Trent was saying, like the psychology of why like why he was so manipulative in this way of like using, trying to like connect and then using that against them. And like I think he said like a little bit of like he really hadn't like said of like his own like personal experience of like musical career, like why he is the way he is, like, so I'm kind of curious. I feel like that would have been cool, like a cool addition to see like his own like previous experience, and like if this was like why he is the way he is now. And I think also like it had a really good character arc, but the way it ended, I almost wanted to see like a little bit after, like, okay, what happens, like what happens now, because like we saw the rebirth of Andrew, but like I'm kind of curious to see like how Fletcher, like, how he changes now that he's like, he might have like found the person that he like, the musician that he
Was
actually has
Joe
been like searching
Jones? Is
for.
that what he's
Mhm.
Yeah, I think.
Or Charlie
Um,
Parker.
yeah, and so like now that he's like found that, like how do they go from here, especially with like all of this like past trauma that has happened over the movie. But yeah, overall that the character development was really good, and the the cinematic elements of like, I really liked a lot of like the close-up shots of like when they close up on the instruments and you'd see like the sweat from them playing, and like even like the blood that would happen sometimes, and just like showing like they're like pouring themselves into these like instruments that they're playing. I thought that was really good as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought that was incredible, especially like the difference in like the spitting. So like when he's with the kind of like the JV group or whatever, how like they spit and they like take their time. But then when he's with like Fletcher's group, like they spit just on the floor, like there's no cleaning it up because you're on his time. I really like the conflicts in this movie. So, obviously first you have like Andrew and Fletcher, like that's the main one, but then you see like Andrew with success, and then Andrew with his love interest, with his family, with other players like Conley. And then of course, like, going back to in person, like getting hit by a truck and having to deal with all that stuff. Like there was just so many conflicts in this movie that just made it so interesting, and they didn't feel forced. Like they felt very natural to how it'd be like, if your career is being a drummer, your family's gonna doubt it a little bit. So I thought it was really cool how they just kind of included all that. So you can just see like the psychology of Andrew and seeing what he's going through as a person, trying to get to success, trying to please Fletcher and something like that. So I thought that was all just crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. The scene that I kind of like thought was the funniest was when they were sitting at the dinner table, and like they had like two other guys who were like playing football or something, and like you have Andrew who's like playing for like this top band from like this good university or music university, and you have like two guys who are like D3 in football or something, and like I think Andrew was a little bit like disappointed in like everyone around the table because they didn't like really understood like the accomplishment that he had. And I feel like that was a good um for me. It's like it made me realize like, yeah, maybe there's a lot of musicians that like put in a lot of work, but like a lot of people don't really like realize it. Like society, they will put more like care into like the football or like the sports world rather than like the music world, which is also should be something that we appreciate because honestly, like music is something that like keeps me going through like every day because like it's just something that calms me, relax me or something. So I feel like overall the movie was like it like in the perspective of like musician, it was really well developed and so yeah.
Trent, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was with okay. Well, so just to go off the conflict, there's like both internal and external conflict, which I think is super important. And I feel like I could kind of feel the pain of Andrew. Um, and I wanted to talk about the cinematography of the last scene where it gets darker and lighter as so like there's it becomes essentially just them two. Like you don't see anybody else. It's just the two of them. And he's initially extremely angry at Andrew for Caravan, but then he starts to like he gives him that nod of approval. That to me was like the best part of the movie. That like nod of approval and then the look of relief on Andrew's face, but then also like this like overwhelming like he's a feeling of control that Andrew has over him and like the pain of the drumsticks and how physically difficult it is to do what he's doing and the blood and the sweat like that you see bouncing off the cymbals and the drums. I think that I agree. I would have liked to see Fletcher's development, and also it would have been nice to see something at the end. But in my opinion, it would have made the movie worse because the way it ends, you have to like think so much about it. And also, the reason why Fletcher's character is so good is because you don't know why he's such a jerk and why he's so abusive.
And then yeah, one thing I wanted to add to that and sort of connect with what Mahlon said. It's funny that you say like Stockholm syndrome because what I was thinking throughout the movie was, at the beginning you have Andrew has such a close relationship with his father, but then as he starts drumming, he spends less time with him and more time working on his drumming and trying to get that approval, like you said, from Fletcher. So it seems like he's made Fletcher his new father figure. And the sort of what I was thinking, well, it changed like 3 times throughout the film. I was trying to figure out where did he die and then where was he reborn. And it seemed to me at the very end, it was he died when he hugged his father on that stage, and that was just rock bottom for him. He just totally humiliated himself. But then he actually turned around and went back on stage and really took control. And I think that's where his rebirth was. So where do y'all see his death and rebirth? Was it at that moment or
Maybe he was
other
in
moments?
purgatory then, because
Yeah.
I would have said he died when he got kicked off. But now I'm agreeing with you, and I'm thinking he's in purgatory, like after he gets kicked off until that point.
Yeah, he dies when he gets hit by that bus because he's just kind of just done, and like that was the end of it. And then like I thought it was so cool, like when his dad was like looking through the crack, like watching his son play, and it just kind of for me it kind of showed that battle between the dad and Fletcher because like you even see at the dinner table when his dad's like, oh, and you're not going to play at what did he say, Lincoln? Like that's the biggest
Lincoln Center.
yeah, like you're not going to play there, and it's like that's your dad telling you that. And so yeah, no, I really like that whole purgatory and the death kind of being when he gets hit by the bus or when he's cut.
I
Any
would
other
have
moments?
at first I thought the diff was also in the car crash, but now that you're explaining it the way you did, Caroline, I can see that and it makes a lot more sense. And I just thought, yeah, that's like probably my 2 cents.
What do you think, Talib?
I was just gonna say I agree, like with your point when you said he was reborn at the end when he like finally got that approval from Fletcher. But can I ask like a question?
Yeah.
Like, do y'all think like everything that Andrew went through in the movie, like, was that approval at the end really worth it?
Um,
Mm.
that one's tough. For me, I'd say no, but for him, I'd say yes because like he was just looking for that the whole time. Like he just wanted that guy, Fletcher, just to love him and like actually because you can tell that Fletcher cares in a weird way, but he cares because like when that guy kills himself,
Mhm.
he's like breaking down, crying, like tears are being shed. And he says like when he presents it to the class, he's like, oh, he died. But he hesitated when he said died because he was gonna say killed himself, but he didn't want to. And so I don't know. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that's where I kind of agree with Chloe. I kind of want to see if he kept drumming after that moment of approval. Like, I want to see what happened next. Yeah, Trent, what do you think?
I think Chloe. I'll let Chloe go because
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I definitely agree that me personally, obviously, music is not worth it to me to be abused in that way. But we kind of see like over the entire like film, like he's choosing drumming and music over like everything else, over like romance, over like having like spending time with his father and like and friends and all these other things. Like he's choosing this and like success in drumming over everything else. And so like the approval from Fletcher is like it's validating all these choices that he's like made for himself, I feel like, and like in his pursuit of success in drumming over everything else. And so like I feel like to him it probably was worth it just because like it has validated like all his choices, and it's like, oh, so I actually by this validation I actually am good enough, I might be able to make it in the future. And so I felt like that was kind of like what he needed to, if it kept going in the movie, like I feel like he probably would keep drumming after that. And I don't know how their relationship would be after that, but yeah.
yeah, I am a little angry at Andrew in a way because, well, I don't know what he'll do after this. And I would hope that he'd leave that guy. And I don't think it's worth it what he's been through. I think the beauty of this movie is that it's so simple. There's really only two characters, and there's just this struggle back and forth. But the reason why I think it's good is because he doesn't end up taking the higher road, right? He's consumed by this guy. He sees that he's playing the piano one night and while he's eating that pizza, and he can't but help himself but go in and get closer to this guy. It's this like super toxic relationship. And even in the end, I don't think he's grown. I think that he's still stuck in this relationship. And in that way, there really isn't a resolution to him. There's a resolution in the sense of he's achieved this pinnacle of drumming, but not emotionally. Emotionally, he's still in this like toxic mess. And we don't know if he'll ever, and in a way, we're worried about him because we know what happened to the other guy who made it to Lincoln Center.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. For me, it's like we enjoy it so much because it's the human ending. Like it's it's a showing of like everything he worked for finally kind of paying off in a sense. Like, you know, it's human for him to be petty and go into the and watch him play. It's human for him to be like, watch this, like I'm gonna show you that I'm really good. And but it's also human to be manipulated by it. Be like, oh, you know what? He's gonna try one more time to reach out and tell me that like I'm important just to get set up, because that's Fletcher's human side of it, because he's upset for getting fired. So for me, it felt very human. Like, you know, it wasn't some superhero on and off stage. It's just like a constant battle, like you said. So that's where I get that.
Yeah, so speaking of, humanity being deeply, deeply flawed at the very least, what do y'all think about Fletcher's actions? Do you think his ways of teaching were justified, just to create the next Charlie Parker? Is that all, like, is it justified?
I don't know. I mean, I get it, like him trying to make the next Charlie Parker, but like it depends on, you know, I get the motivation and stuff, but it depends on like the person. Like I remember, you know, playing basketball and our head coach like throwing basketballs, like not at kids, but you get the general idea, and screaming at you in your face. And, you know, half of them like, you know, would be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get better from this. And the other half are sitting there crying and leave. And it's like, well, that guy was a really good player, but you're just saying he's not mentally strong because you bullied him. So I don't think that's a very good technique for trying to get people better.
In the sense that he's trying to find or like produce the best students, I would say Fletcher action is probably, it could be justified just because I feel like if he gave a good point where like if you aren't harsh on people, usually they would think like, oh, I did a good job, even though they could probably perform better if you just like tell them. Over like I know in the movie he was like, good job was probably like the worst because there isn't like a really like a scale of like what's good and what's like the best. If you just say good job, it's like you're just telling them whatever they did was just like the best that they could have done. But if you were like Fletcher, you just keep on pushing and pushing them until like they probably reached like their max potential. So at the end, I think Fletcher probably could have been justified, but that's
I don't know. I think those are like the two extremes though. So there's gotta be a middle ground somewhere where you are pushing them to their limits, but not just completely degrading them as human beings and crushing their confidence. Yeah, what do y'all think?
This is where having a little backstory, like Chloe said, would be very helpful, and you would sympathize with him a little more. Like, if I'm just like extrapolating, I'm thinking he was probably somebody was like this to him in the past, right? But we can only assume that. Now, is that a rhetorical device in and of itself? The fact that we have to sort of fill in the blank. But if we knew that, then I think we could see saying justified is probably not the right word. Saying I understand where he's coming from, probably. And I think especially if you look at his age, he's really old. That type of toxic masculinity was very common and still is in sports and competitive competitions. I'm not discounting the fact that he shouldn't have been doing that, but like understanding that the society that he grew up in, that's the type of motivation that he thought was the correct way to go.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that might have been like for his time growing up, but I there's no justification for this like extreme. Like I feel like with also just like to tie in the back, yeah, thank you. To tie in the like the two father figures of like his actual father and Fletcher being like the new father figure. I had like written a comment about that like when I was watching it, because I felt like they were two like completely opposite but like parallels in a sense of like an almost like antagonists for Andrew, because like the father is like the one side of like one extreme of just like not supporting his dreams at all and just being like, well, just quit, it's fine, like you're probably not going to do anything with this anyways. And then like Fletcher the other side of like, if you have potential, I'm going to like literally degrade you and to try to get like all this potential out. And so like I in his actions himself, because he has clearly crossed like this like moral line. Like you don't have to be like good job even if like they suck, but like literally like using family trauma against you in like comments is just, it's not right. It reminds me of like I'm not a dancer, but like I remember dancer culture like is like also really bad like this, of just like in like body shaming and of just like this demanding for perfection. And it's just that crossing of the line, which unfortunately happens, but like it doesn't make it right.
Yeah, my sisters were in competitive dance and my parents pulled them out because of that. Like it's very real. I don't want to interrupt anybody, but
You're good. Yeah.
Um, kind of like how Caroline said. I think. Well, I feel like the way he teaches, it's understandable. But if you have a person that kills himself because of your class, then there should be like a middle ground where you stop and not push it that far.
Uh, okay, I just wanted to like use this example just because so Gordon Ramsay, right? He's the best chef, right? Everyone. And so if y'all know like his chef was an asshole to him as well. But now like he produced this like top renowned chef, top Michelin, whatever. And like if you see his like cooking shows, he's also being an asshole to like these adults. And so I feel like in a real world, probably it could be understandable. I feel like Trent put in a better word, not justifiable, but maybe understandable from where he came from. But it's probably also dealing with like the time he grew up in. Like that was probably he's pretty much, yeah, he's a lot older than us. So it's probably like I feel like it's difficult because like if you, I don't know, for me personally, if you don't, or if you aren't harsh, I can see like they're not produced. They could probably slack off at some point. So like there's probably like this midline, but like it's just something like probably difficult. But I just wanted to say like the example of Gordon Ramsay just to like put it like some real world into it or perspective. So
I think that's a good point. But then my other question about this is, was he doing all this actually to create really good musicians and good students? Or was he just trying to make himself famous by producing the best band that he possibly could? So basically, like, is he just really devoted to music, or is he just so arrogant and such a narcissist that he's willing to just degrade and destroy his students to make himself look like the best conductor in the world? What do y'all think about that?
Um, that one's tough. I definitely think he's a narcissist. Going back just a little bit before that question, talking about what Trent mentioned earlier about like trying to understand Fletcher. I thought it was really interesting because in the beginning when he's like talking to Andrew, he's like, "Oh, tell me about your life story," like all this stuff. He asked him about like, "Do you come from music?" And you could see that Fletcher obviously does come from music. So that goes back to like maybe his dad was an abusive musician, but then you see Andrew who does not come from any music. And I think that is what stood out to Fletcher because he's like, "Oh, you're going to be the next something because you come from none of this," and you get to that. But going to your question, Caroline, yeah, I I think he has a drive for finding that person, but that drive is starting through his own like ego and his need to be successful also. And maybe that's why he jumps immediately to like the JV thing after he gets fired, and he's like, "You guys are either gonna be the next big shots or you're gonna be on the streets playing drums because this one moment decides you." But he's gonna take the fame for it because remember how he said like any idiot can move their fingers around. And so for me, it's like he's gonna take the credit for moving his fingers around and that person getting big, but he's not gonna take the credit if you get hit by a bus and have to quit. So
um to answer that question, I think that he wants to live vicariously through whoever Chloe, through through whoever he is training, And I think that he failed in the past and he wasn't good enough. He wasn't talented enough. And now he's this old guy and he's like misogynistic, sadistic, just like, yeah, he's trying to correct probably some of his past mistakes. But just to answer like the third question about like the cycles of death and rebirth, I definitely could agree and like with your points about when you think he was rebirth. But in a way, I feel like Andrew is kind of dead the whole entire time. Like, if that makes any sense. Like, I guess in the beginning, he's kind of alive. He's like the doe-eyed kid who wants to be successful, but it kind of just feels like he's just like coasting through. And there's a lot of self-sabotage going on, especially like when we see him break off the relationship. But yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't mean to click the other one. I was gonna agree with that because like in the beginning, I feel like he's not alive. Because he doesn't talk to that girl. He wants to, but what makes him to talk to that girl is getting that approval from Fletcher in the beginning. So maybe there's multiple forms of death and rebirth, like because at first he looks at the girl and he like turns back and thinks about it, but he's not going to do it. But then once he gets that approval from Fletcher, like, hey, come to 6 a.m. be at my band, the first thing he does is go like, hey, like, do you want to go on a date? And so I think that death and rebirth can see multiple times. I think the major one is what we discussed earlier, but I think there's a bunch of mini ones throughout with his like confidence and who he is as a person.
But his happiness is conditional.
Oh,
See,
100.
if he, I would say he would be he was alive if he was kicked off the team, but was able to remain happy or stay with in the relationship.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
maybe,
no,
yeah.
Because he was like, I just, we got to break this off right now. And that's just not reasonable.
All right. Well, that was definitely at least 10 minutes. I'm pretty sure it was a lot longer than that. Are there any final points, anything anyone else wanted to add before we sign off here? All right. Good job, guys.